right, man. We got more dumb criminals, man. Dumb criminals that got away, thought they got away with it, but then they didn't. So let's see what this is here for, man. Welcome to Rich House Crime. We're here to, you're proven, you're innocent until proven guilty over here. So let's see what's going on.
Look at the felons that were foolish enough to hire a hitman on Craigslist, steal a penguin from a zoo, and post their own mugshot on Facebook. As we check out the dumbest criminals that got away with it until they didn't.
Wow.
Fake friends. We all know a social media addict who can't go a day without posting about their lives. But in some situations, being terminally online can land you in serious trouble. Back in 2009, a con man called Maxi Sopo went on the run after stealing $200,000 by committing bank fraud in Seattle, Washington. He did this by convincing his friends to lie about their income so they could acquire loans for expensive cars. But instead of actually spending the cash on the luxury vehicles, they fraudulently used it to fund a trip to Las Vegas instead. They said what happens
I live in Vegas. What are the odds?
in Vegas stays in Vegas. But Sopo didn't stay in Sin City for long, as when he discovered the authorities were investigating his crimes, he decided to go and hide out in Cancun, Mexico. However, instead of laying low, Sopo started partying in nightclubs and boasting about his lifestyle on Facebook, as he uploaded pictures and posts about his escapades.
Always
the
an
post
idiot.
revealed he was in Mexico, but Sopo's location was set to private, so the police couldn't figure out exactly where he was.
What an idiot.
That is, until the criminal made the dire mistake of sending a friend request to a man he met at a party. It turned out to be a former U.S. Justice Department official. The police spotted the former official on Sopo's friends list and recognized him, so they contacted him to explain the situation. He then confirmed that while he had no idea Sopo was a fugitive, he had met him in Cancun. This led the cops to Sopo's location, and the fuzz finally found and arrested their man in 2010 before convicting him of 4 counts of fraud. Ultimately, Sopo received a 33-month sentence plus a hefty $150,000 fine for his crimes. And it's crazy that he was caught over a couple of Facebook posts and a seriously misjudged friend request. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, from living La Vida Loca to lying in a lockup.
What an idiot.
Hijacking history. Working as an academic is prestigious, intellectual, and boring. So in 1997, a Civil War expert and New York State Archives employee called Daniel D. Laurello decided to spice up his life by turning to crime. Laurello started stealing historical artifacts at work and selling them on eBay, and his loot included a letter from 1823 that was written by the former Vice President John C. Calhoun to a general from New York. Calhoun served under the presidents John Adams and Andrew Jackson, so the artifact is a pretty special piece of American history. And in 2008, Laurello sold it for just $1,700.
No.
But ultimately, Laurello was the one who paid the price. See, a former history teacher called Joseph Romito found the eBay listing and instantly recognized the letter. He knew that it was supposed to be held by the New York State Library, so it was obvious that the person selling it on eBay, aka Laurello, had stolen it. In hindsight, attempting to sell stolen artifacts to history nerds who know everything about them is pretty stupid, and Romito's discovery led to a full-blown police investigation. This uncovered that between 1997 and 2008, Laurello had swiped over 1,600 rare books and documents right under everyone's noses. Unsurprisingly, he was promptly arrested, sentenced to up to 6 years in jail, and slapped with a $125,000 fine. But the authorities were only able to recover 90% of the materials that he'd stolen and sold. So it looks like Laurello will go down in the history books too, as his actions have caused over 100 of New York's precious artifacts to go missing forever.
That's crazy, bro.
Dumb defense. When I was a kid, I told my Auntie Ethel that her cooking was too salty, and since then I've learned that once you say something, you can never take it back. But while I got a dressing down from my aunt, in 1985 a criminal called Dennis Newton had to face the full force of the law when he misspoke while on trial for armed robbery. Newton was suspected of robbing a convenience store in Oklahoma, and when he went to court he thought it would be a great idea to do away with lawyers and represent himself. At first, he was arguing his defense pretty well, but when the manager of the store testified that Newton was the thief, the criminal broke out in a rage and shouted, "I should have blown your head off."
Oh, my God.
A shocked silence settled over the courtroom, and as Newton realized he'd just admitted to his crime, he lamely added, "If I'd been the one that was there." Talk about turning yourself in. Following his outburst, all bets were off, and it took less than half an hour for the jury to sentence him guilty and recommend a 30-year sentence.
Oh, my God.
To be honest, I'm surprised it took that long. Hitman wanted. Personally, I've only ever used Craigslist to sell some unwanted furniture and hire a handyman. But in 2008, Anne-Marie Linscott from Grand Rapids, Michigan, posted a seemingly innocent advertisement on the site offering freelance work that concealed a criminal request. When 3 people responded to Linscott and asked her what the job was, she explained that she'd pay them $5,000 to, quote, eradicate the wife of a man she'd fallen in love with. See, Linscott had an affair with a guy called John back in 2005 and fell for him, but he left her to go back to his wife. So Anne-Marie turned to Craigslist to violently and permanently break up their marriage.
Hitman on Craigslist.
Surprisingly, the 3 respondents immediately reported Linscott to the cops, and her post was all the evidence the authorities needed to charge her with 12.5 years in prison for the intent to end life.
God.
Man, publicly hiring a hitman online is unbelievably stupid. And I still don't know what responses Anne-Marie was expecting to her request.
Pretty
Did she
stupid.
think an actual hitman would reply? Like, "Hey, I'm a professional sniper. DM me the address, and I'll eradicate whoever you want. XOXO.
Wow.
One wild night. Every now and then it's fun to let loose and have a wild night out, but in 2012, Rice Jones and Carrie Mules partied a little too hard and had a wild life night when they got drunk and stole a penguin from the SeaWorld in Queensland, Australia.
No.
The Welsh tourists were on vacation when they drunkenly broke into the park and swum with the dolphin, set off a fire extinguisher in a shark enclosure, and finally kidnapped Dirk the penguin and took him back to their apartment.
Oh, my God.
Now, I've had some bad hangovers, but as the Brits woke up and found Dirk waddling around, they must have been filled with regret. They initially tried caring for the penguin by giving him bread and putting him in the shower, but eventually they gave up and abandoned Dirk under the nearby Southport Pier. The duo would have gotten away with it, but they posted videos of Dirk onto Facebook, which were reported to the police, so they were consequently arrested and fined over $650 each. The judge deemed that the tourists didn't act with malice, so they actually weren't convicted of a crime, although I don't suppose they'll be welcome back in SeaWorld anytime soon.
Yeah, that was stupid, bro.
Dirk? Well, he was eventually found under the pier before being returned to his enclosure and reunited with his girlfriend, Peaches. Oh, I love a happy ending.
That's crazy.
Criminal confession. Honesty isn't always the best policy, and sometimes telling the truth can ruin your life. Just ask James Washington, a 61-year-old inmate at Turney Center Prison in Nashville, who had a terrible heart attack back in 2009 while serving a 15-year sentence for attempted homicide.
Wow.
For most people, going to prison and having a heart attack sounds like a worst-case scenario. But as Washington lay on his deathbed, he made his situation 1,000 times worse by revealing his deepest, darkest secret to a prison guard.
Wow.
The 47-year-old convict really thought he was going to die, so he confessed that he was the man who committed a brutal homicide that had gone unsolved since 1995. The investigation had been abandoned due to a lack of DNA evidence, so Washington decided to finally clear his guilty conscience.
Wow.
But to his surprise, he made a full recovery from the heart attack. And when his health started to improve, the authorities were able to charge him with the crime. Washington tried to take his confession back after he survived, but the damage was done, and his 15-year sentence was upgraded to a life sentence of at least 51 years for the 1995 case.
God,
So when Washington was released from hospital, he returned to prison with no release date in sight, and he's still locked up today, all due to his honesty and the wonders of modern medicine.
What an idiot.
Paying the price. Graham Price was just a boring guy with a boring job until the 58-year-old Englishman decided to break bad and steal $13 million from a bank. See, this real-life Walter White worked at a British bank called Halifax as a financial consultant, which is a fancy schmancy way of saying he provided financial advice to customers. But instead of giving genuine advice, he preyed on unsuspecting clients by telling them to invest money with him personally, while promising that he could use his financial know-how to double their investments. Then he would spend their money on luxury vacations, new cars, and a serious gambling problem that primarily involved betting on horse races. When his investors started demanding their returns, he'd use the money from his newer investors to pay them back like one big pyramid scheme. He took around $4.2 million from clients, and when this cash eventually ran dry, he started siphoning funds directly from Halifax, stealing $9 million more from the bank while he worked. Incredibly, he managed to run this operation from 2001 to 2004 without being caught. But one day, an auditor inspecting the bank came across a piece of paper tucked into a safe, and they found it was a handwritten IOU note from Price that openly stated he'd borrowed $9 million from Halifax. See, Price was so addicted to gambling that he truly believed he was going to win big and pay the bank back. So he left the note in the vault to explain that he hadn't stolen the money, and he was merely borrowing it until he won. He'd hoped the bank would understand and let him off easy, but unfortunately, Halifax and the police didn't accept this explanation. So the piece of paper just acted as a confession, as Price was promptly arrested and jailed for 12 years in 2005. Unfortunately, some of Price's clients never got their money back, and his scheme completely bankrupted them. But the criminal wasn't overly apologetic. He told the police that he'd been arrested too soon and he could have been able to pay it all back if he was given another week to bet on horses, as he definitely would have won. Yeah, sure thing, buddy.
Now, I want to know who y'all feel was the dumbest. This was part 1. If y'all want part 2, just write part 2 in the comments. That's the best way to go about it, all right? Rich House Crime is the channel. Make sure y'all subscribe at the channel for this dumb criminals that we going to talk about. And other than that, I'm out of here. See y'all on the next one.